Hello, I'm Isaiah Queer. Welcome to this edition of the Isaiah Queer podcast. So today I'm going to share with you a presentation that I did a few days ago actually. I presented on two landmark Supreme Court cases. These cases are Miranda versus Arizona in 1966 and Mapp versus Ohio 1961. I was asked by my professor to choose two cases that relate to civil rights issues. So I decided to choose Mapp versus Ohio and Miranda versus Arizona because these two cases speak volume about law enforcement issues and the issues surrounding self-incrimination. So I am going to share with you this presentation. I hope you enjoy it. And if you are not familiar with these cases, I hope this is an introduction to these two landmark Supreme Court cases. And I hope you share with me some feedback and tell me whether it was or whether these cases was an interesting cases. So I look forward to any feedback about the this presentation and these cases. Thank you. I hope you enjoy this.
Good morning, class. Morning. Isaiah Kuya, and for today's presentation, I'm going to be discussing two landmark cases, and these cases for the first case is Mapp versus Ohio 1961, and the second case is Miranda versus Arizona in 1966. So before I discuss these two landmark Supreme Court cases, uh, I would like to define some key terms. First and foremost, due process, and second would be civil rights. Due process has to do with the government actors following certain procedures before they deprive a person of life, liberty, or property. As we see in the case of Mapp versus Ohio, she was actually denied or deprived her due process rights as enshrined in the Fourth Amendment. All right. And the second term is civil rights. All right. So civil rights has to do with that social rights, that rights that are afforded us, that social opportunities that are afforded us, regardless of what race, on gender, and so forth. Um, Moving on, after defining these two key terms in the presentation, uh, this is a case brief of Mapp versus Ohio, 1961. So the year was 1957 in Cleveland, Ohio. So this is Dory map, as you can see here, and this is the flag of Ohio, right? And Dory map was a very quiet lady. She lives in the suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. She used to have an affair with this guy who was a huge gambling guy, right? He used to deal into illegal gambling activities. So what happened one day, fast forward, there was a bombing, all right? There was a bombing and another guy who was in connection with the guy who Dory was having an affair with, he was suspected of the crime. So they 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 tried to find him. So they knew that the Cleveland Police Department knew that he has some sort of connection with Dory Map. So they went to Dory Map to find this guy because he was suspected of the allegation, all right? So when they went to Dory Map's home, she first asked whether the police or the cops had warrant. When the answer was we do have warrant, all right, but Dorina first phoned her lawyer when she heard the bang at her door. She phoned her lawyer. She said, some group of police officers at my door. I'm not sure whether I should open the door or not. So her lawyer advised her to not open the door. But before I go any further in this particular case, all right, I will let you guys, I will implore you guys to imagine right now if a cop comes knocking at your door and you ask, do you have a warrant? And if they say yes, will you open the door? Will you actually open the door? Even if they have a warrant. Let's show. I'll show you, all right. Thank you for the answer of the question. Um, so Dory Map hesitated to open the door. When she hesitated, the cops they were still adamant that we have to enter into this home. And they finally burst open her door. She had her daughter upstairs, and they entered into her daughter's room. They tried searching for the guy. They didn't find the guy nowhere. Checking her business in her basement and so forth. They didn't find anything. And they went to her drawers. They started checking and searching, and they found some obscene materials. When they found those obscene materials, they how do you call it, arrested Dory Map. They arrested her, and subsequently she was tried and she was convicted of having possession of obscene materials. The interesting part in the case is that, um, as we can see here, the interesting part, which is the issue, right? We see whether the evidence obtained through illegal search and seizure is admissible in state court. This is the important issue in this particular case. I would like to ask you guys too. I guess you all are familiar with this case. Should evidence obtained by law enforcement by illegal means be admissible in state courts or in courts in general? That was the ruling in this case. If you said no, you agree with those judges in 1961, all right? That was the ruling. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of Mapp. I think the ruling was like 5-4 that the Supreme Court held that evidence obtained in violation of the Fourth Amendment cannot be used in state prosecutions. And that was the birth of the exclusionary rule in terms of coming into full effect. Because before Mapp versus Ohio, the exclusionary rule was already into effect, but it was only applied to what federal courts or federal cases. So moving on, uh, uh, I I would like to ask, how does it relate? How does the case relate to civil rights issues? Uh, it relates to civil rights issues in ways that has to do with ongoing debates about police misconduct, illegal search and seizures, privacy rights, especially in the digital age. Should police have access, or should police just wiretap people computers or electronic devices without warrants? I said no to that questions. So that's one of the importance of this case. And the question also is this: why is this case important? Or why did I even choose this case? Uh, this case is important because it established that constitutional rights apply not just to what federal courts, but also to what state courts, and that states do not have that constitutional authority to abuse citizens' right. And I also learned that the Supreme Court can use the term, the legal term, incorporation to make federal rights binding on states. The Supreme Court has that authority, that judicial authority to to use that particular legal doctrine. And also that civil rights are not just about what equality alone, but also about providing protections from government abuse and overreach. Moving on, what did I find what did I find surprising in this particular case? I found this case to be surprising because there after the decision was reached by the Supreme Court, there was a huge outcry from law enforcement officers all across the country in 1961. There was a huge backlash, and some found it to be controversial, but in my opinion, it was not controversial at all. I think it solidified Americans' Fourth Amendment rights. And a professor from the University of Chicago called Mapp, during Mapp as the Rosa Parks of the Fourth Amendment. I think that was an interesting description. And if I were working on this case, what would I have done differently? I might argue for clearer standards, as particularly as it relates to what probable cause. That's one of the things I'll going to actually work on. I'll argue for. I also am going to push for better training when it comes to constitutional searches for violations. Like most police officers, I'm not sure they are aware of the exclusionary rules. What evidence should be admissible in court, what should not be admissible in court. Uh, our prior class last time, I even mentioned about our personal scenario. So I was going to work one night and the car pulled over somebody else. He put his emergency blinker on. And while I was going, I saw the blinker. I didn't know that I was to just move to the left lane. Instead, I slowed my vehicle and passed right beside the cars while he was pulling somebody off. That was illegal. I shouldn't have done that. So after he pulled the other person over, he pulled me over too. And then he questioned me. He was like, "Do you know why I'm pulling you over?" I said, "No." He said, "I'm pulling you over because you passed right beside me and you should have just slowed down, passed to the left side of the emergency vehicle, my vehicle." I was like, oh. So fast forward a few months, I went to traffic court. Uh, I talked to the judge after he finished explaining himself the story. He even admitted that my tag was an out-of-state tag. I should have been using that tag for the last 3 months since I was residing to North Carolina now. I was using a Pennsylvania tag. So I talked to the judge. I was like, I was nervous, all right, but I still talked to the judge. I was like, um, I think the police job is not just to protect life and properties, but also to educate the public about the rule of law. That's what I told the judge. And she subsequently reduced my charges. So I had a $400 fine for traffic violation. She reduces it at 300. But why I brought that scenario up is that he shouldn't have used my out of state tag as an evidence or as a evidence against me in the courtroom. That was not admissible at all. So it tells me that these cops are not well informed about the rule of law. So to move on, we'll move to the next case, Miranda versus Arizona. So after Mapp versus Ohio, 5 years later, we have Miranda versus Arizona. So Ernesto Miranda was a 23-year-old guy who was a man, in fact, was a 23-year-old man who was accused of what rape. And after investigation, he confessed to kidnapping and rape uh, after he was interrogated by police officers in Arizona. So the main issue in this particular case have to do with It has to do with Fifth Amendment's protection against self-incrimination, all right, as it extends to police interrogation. So before Miranda versus Arizona, there was no warning as to, I mean, let's say if a police officers arrest a suspect, they just go about interrogating the suspect without reading warnings. Like, I mean, let me ask this question: who here can perfectly recite or paraphrase the Miranda warning? That's one. But there are four, all right? So one is right to remain silent. You have the right to remain silent. And you, yeah, go ahead. Yes, that's one. Yeah, you can paraphrase. Absolutely. That's another one too. And if you do not have an attorney or lawyer, all right, one would be afforded to you at no cost. So there are four Miranda warnings. So prior to Miranda versus Arizona, police didn't used to do that. They were not practicing such. But Miranda versus Arizona changed the landscape of police enforcement in this particular country. So the main issue or the legal question in this particular case has to do with Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination, like I said earlier. So the Supreme Court ruled in 1966, 5-4, and the ruling was yes, that suspects must be informed of their rights before custodial interrogation. It's not just any type of interrogation like police pulling you over, like he did in my case. He shouldn't have read my Miranda warning. He shouldn't have informed me of my Miranda rights because it was just a basic traffic offense or basic traffic stop. All right. So um how does this case relate to current civil rights issues? First, this case is relevant in terms of ongoing debates around police accountability, coerced confessions, and especially juvenile interrogations. Juvenile interrogations is a key word in this particular case. I mean, although Anderson Miranda was 23, he was a 23-year-old man. Most people do not know their basic constitutional right, let alone juveniles. For example, in the case of Ropov versus Simmons, 2005, I don't know whether you guys are familiar with this particular case. Um, Christopher Simmons was a 17-year-old kid, all right? He one day he had the epiphany that he wanted to kill somebody. So he get on with his group of friends, 15, 16-year-olds. He told you guys about the plan. Now I want to kill somebody. So he, but one of his friends didn't go with the plan, but his other friends was like, okay, come on, let's go do it. So they went to this lady house called Shirley Crook. They tried to kidnap her. They tried to burglarize her place. They kidnapped her, took her to, it was in Missouri, all right, St. Louis, Missouri. They took her to a bridge, tie her, put duct tape, tie her hands, feet, and everything, and threw her into the river, right? And she died. Uh, few months later, he started bragging about such a horrific incident to his friends. And his friends snitched on him. And they told police officers. And they told police officers he was arrested and interrogated. He claimed after he was tried and convicted, he claimed that his Miranda rights were not properly accorded or afforded to him too. But I'm just bringing the case up to say that juveniles are not aware of their rights. They do not even know whether such thing as Miranda exists. And Ernesto Miranda case, as we just said, was no exception. And this case challenged the adequacy of Miranda warnings or questions suspects truly understand their rights. Like I said earlier in the explanation, since suspects do not understand their rights, all right? And why is it important? Why is this case important? I think this case is important because it reinforces due process and what the Fifth Amendment, and also balance law enforcement power and individual what life and liberties. So moving on, what did I learn about this case, Miranda versus Arizona 1966? I learned that constitutional rights must be actively protected at all time. All right. And I also learned that Ernesto Miranda was released on parole after he served some time in prison for the kidnapping and rape of that individual. He was released to the public, and when he got released, he went and hang out in the rough part of Phoenix, Arizona. Unfortunately for him, somebody stabbed him. Once the person stabbed him, he was killed. When he was killed, ironically, police questioned and warned that particular individual of Miranda rights. How funny is that? How ironic is that? So prior to that, prior to Miranda versus Arizona, there was no such warning. And it was in his death case that somebody was warned or somebody was shown their Miranda rights. All right. And what surprised me in this particular case is that Inerso Miranda was convicted from his confession. I mean, even though that particular confession, when it went to the Supreme Court, they excluded a particular confession because there was a violation of of his right. He should have been warned certain right that he has, like right to counsel, right to remain silent, and all of that. And the Miranda warning became uh, a landmark case. It became a landmark case, and it became a fundamental part of the American policing system. So right now, it is like a standard. Whenever a police officer pull you over, I mean, for custodial interrogation purposes, he or she is going to first and foremost warn you of your Miranda rights. Um, if I were working on this case, would I have done differently on the Miranda versus Arizona? I'm gonna argue for stronger education of defendants about their rights. Like I explained throughout this case or this presentation, uh, juveniles and defendants in general, they are not fully aware of their rights. And people who are not fully aware of their rights, they are often the ones committing crimes. I think you should do your jail math and read the laws before or familiarize yourself with the law before you involve yourself in crime. But is the opposite. In conclusion, after discussing Mapp versus Ohio 1961 and Miranda versus Arizona 1966, to board this whole discussion or presentation, in conclusion, I would say that both cases protect um, the accused against state abuse of power, as we saw in Dory Map case, and also the Map the case it safeguards Americans against what illegal searches, and WAP Miranda against coerced confessions. Also, together these cases form the foundation of modern criminal procedure as it relates to liberties, civil liberties in the United States. And lastly, they cordially remind us that civil rights are, are not just about what equality alone in society, but also about fair treatment, honorable regardless of federal jurisdiction. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.